are the mechanisms that can be adapted to minimize the risk posed by third-party applications, especially in view of the vertical applications coming into 5G network? May I ask Dr. Hui XU to respond?
I think it is very important since for the minimize the security risk posed by the vertical application. I think the 5G system provides a network capability exposure. I think based on the network capability exposure architecture such as CAPIP and NEI, I think in different this technology, this architecture in different capability exposure scenarios, such as private network construction and operation and MEC. I think the security risk and the problems caused by this exposure should also attract extensive attention. I think the security risk for exposure, I think, include communication security risk and security risks existing in network exposure interface and the data and resource security risk. I think 5G system should strengthen authentication and authorization. And I think 5G system should monitor interface status in real time and isolate the exposure platform from the core network. I think for the data security, operator should refine the protection methods and strengthen the definition of the responsibilities for circulation and use of the exposed data. I think in the future, some new security technologies such as zero trust and blockchain, I think maybe can be introduced to the 5G or 5G advanced or maybe 6G to realize the capability exposure and to ensure the security the 5G system the security. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sanjeev, could you throw some additional light on this aspect?
Sorry, I've been mute. So I think with the utilization of SBA architecture, we have possibility of application use cases implementation managed by third-party service provider who will be utilizing SBA APIs. So in this case, the network is being exposed to the third parties in the form of APIs. So while you are hardening, you are securing the system, your core system, but in case of any unpatched, unhardened system and third-party application may have an impact on the core system. You cannot actually control their system, but yes, at the boundary level wherein you're exposing the APIs, couple of mechanisms which we can utilize is, which is mutual authentication of SBA API using both client and server-based certificate manager with the certificate-based authentication. Then we can utilize use of OAuth for SBA API request authorization. And what kind of requests are authorized and up to what levels to the respective third-party application provider. Logging and monitoring is the key whatever is happening on this API is exposed to the third party through network exposure function. We should monitor this closely, what is being utilized, what data is going over that particular interface. I think these are the key mechanisms which service provider can utilize for protection against third party service providers.
Right. Maybe I would like to probe a little further on the same aspect. How to harden or limit the interaction among different layers of your hardware, first layer of OS, container, applications, or third-party applications? How do you, what is the method we can follow to harden and limit the interaction, which is one which can lead to security?
There are hardening. See, the key is proactive patching of vulnerabilities, hardening of the systems. Now, hardening of the systems are at primarily three layers. One is the infrastructure layer. Earlier, it used to be on the physical network function. It used to be the OS, and on top of that, you are running the application. Now, additional layer which is being introduced to virtualize resources is hypervisor. So, there are certain set of hardening guidelines available in the respective security frameworks. Normally, the key mistake, which in the earlier presentation also referred by, is we forget to actually configure the hardening of the respective platforms. So we need to ensure while we go into the production, the underlying infrastructure layer at the host OS, at the hypervisor layer, at the application layer are hardened, are proactively reviewed for vulnerabilities, zero-day vulnerabilities, and then we need to patch them proactively to their latest version so that we are not keeping some loose points for threat actors to exploit. That's my submission on this.
Thank you. Similarly, the one more feature of this 5G is the private networks will get integrated into the 5G networks. So would can I ask Dr. Xu again to throw a little more light on how to make sure, of course, third-party application, I presume that it possibly in the same cloud, whereas a private network, when I refer to, it is a separate entity which is getting integrated into 5G network of the operator. In such a case, what are the other issues?
Sorry, I don't clearly hear your question. Do you mean some for the network slicing or something?
Yes, let me ask once again. How to address the problem likely to be posed by private networks interfacing 5G network with slicing function?
Oh, okay. Thank you. I think in 5G system network slicing, I think it's implement logical isolation on shared resources. I think therefore not taking proper security isolation mechanism and will bring greater security risk. I think 3GPP has defined many mechanisms to protect the network slices. For example, the 5G system implements specific authentication and authorization for network slices by introducing the NSSAAF in release 16. I think through this mechanism, the UE can be authenticated and authorized to private illegal users from accessing the network slice. I think in release 17, the 5G system introduced the network slice admission control feature to monitoring and controls the numbers of the registered UEs per network slices, and also monitor and controls the numbers of PDU sessions per network slice. So I think this in release 18, the 3G PPIC 3 also started a new mechanism for network slices. I believe the 3GPP will continue to enhance the security mechanism to protect the network slice. I think this future, the network slice is very important for 5G network, and it is for the vertical application. I think this the security of the network slice is important for operator to improve the 2B. I think it's a 2B 2B services. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DOTARO, I would like to ask you a question. How to ensure secure communication of IoT and massive machine type communication given their large numbers, their physical and resource limitation in implementing the security features? And one of the concerns is if they will be so large in number that it is not possible for any upgrades physically, and you may have to rely on the remote updation of the softwares and other things. Under those circumstances, what are the issues, and how we can ensure that minimum required security features are created and exploitation is prevented?
Thanks for this very interesting question. IoT is a word which is used for many different things. So it can go from the toothbrush up to medical equipment for remote surgery. And if you consider that, this is not as critical in one case or the other. So the requirement in terms of security are not the same. But coming to your question, we know that at least for the toothbrush, that we won't have a lot of security feature within the toothbrush. So we will have to deal with that, and we already experienced in the past some DDoS attacks, some DDoS of service attacks coming through IoT. So we need to do that. So, but first of all, we have to do what we can in order to introduce the more and more feature of security within the IoT, sorry. But this comes with some limitation where you have the swap constraints, the size, weight, and power constraints. So as you mentioned, in some cases, we won't be able to implement the full level that should be expected in terms of security. So there are some different phases. Enrollment phase is key. You have to control what is inside, what is communicated with your network. Maybe authentication is not something that has been done once, but to be repeated with the given frequency to ensure that the IoTs, as the objects which are communicating with the networks, are the right ones, and to control that. And the main message that I will have here is that if you don't have the right level of security within your IoT, you will have to mitigate the situation with some at the gateway level or at the next up level in order to detect if there are some anomalies in the behavior of the IoT and so on, because you cannot expect and you cannot trust by definition all the IoT in the world. I guess this is an utopia. So you will have to have some mitigations somewhere else. And gateways can be the place. You can have root of trust and distribution, smart distribution of root of trust in your system, just to, in case of, you can forbid some objects to communicate and rely on what is really trustable in your system. That can be a countermeasure in order to compensate the weakness of some of the IoTs. When the IoT, by the way, are enough value, you have to implement the security functions. And there are one of the axes, which is the post-quantum cryptography, which is you have to develop the lightweight PQC in order to make it available for the IoT as much as possible. But again, we don't expect that all the objects will have the high grade level security. This is from an economic point of view, this is something which is not realistic. So you will have to organize your system also taking into account those weaknesses and to introduce the countermeasure. One last point with 6G, we forecast to have more and more interaction with sensing. It means most of the times IoT at the end of the system with impact and interaction with the behavior of the system. It will raise again this issue of trust and behavior and level of security of the termination point of your system. So clearly the question is accurate and we are not at the end of the story.
Thank you. And we will end with two more questions. One, I would like to put it across to Sanjeev Dhallam. How to ensure controlled and flawless configuration of networks in auto-scaling, and how to limit block error rate in auto-scaling? This is mainly with respect to, from the perspective of a service provider.
Before 5G networks will be ready for auto-scaling, it must be ensured that we have proper orchestration and management available. It cannot be done manually, auto-scaling. So auto-scaling will have to be initiated by a management system. This management system, based on the monitored or predicted data, excluding the distributed denial of service which generates high volume of traffic, we exclude that, and the auto-scaling will be orchestrated on every domain and network function involved. This is the monitoring of data, that these services are consuming more resources at radio level or core level or at the transport level. And accordingly, your orchestration platform will do the required provisioning in the underlying ecosystem. As auto-scaling is related to respective services with specific SLAs, so security inclusion in the overall orchestration process is also very, very critical. While we are provisioning differentiated security for differentiated services in 5G, it has to be captured in the orchestration platform. Manually, it is not feasible to control. So if management platform, orchestration platform is well set, established in the service provider environment, then I don't think so there should be any impact of the block error rate. This is my submission on this. Sir.
Thank you. There is one question of my interest. I will put it across to Mr. Emmanuel DOTARO. What should be the framework for security testing of 5G networks? Should it be covering cloud, that is consisting of bare metal, OS, container or VM, orchestrator, or Mano? And apart from that, what should be the testing of functional applications? Should it cover only the network functions or network services or microservices?
So very interesting question, and I don't know if you're aware of that, but we try to think about to renew the certification approaches in Europe for 5G, and so the question of the perimeter is key. So on the other side, as I said in my presentation, security is meaningful end-to-end. You don't care to have a very high-grade security, just one piece of your system if it's weak for the rest. So it has to have a end-to-end meaning. So we should be able to have the evaluation of security, thus testing facilities for that end-to-end. But we are tackling very complex systems, so digital twins may help in order to model and to encompass various aspects of your system in terms of layers. I don't know if you can go as a lower layers, as you mentioned, for up to the bare metal. But we need to develop new methodologies for evaluation. One thing I would like to say is that as it's very complex and it's costly also to evaluate and test those security level, we have also to innovate in terms of the way we will do the evaluation itself. So, for instance, we have some research and some I don't know, access for regulation and certification in Europe, where we consider the methodologies to do composition of certification. You have different pieces of your network which are certified. So you want to have the overall certification. So you need to develop the methodologies to make the combination of all of that. And that's not simple addition. So it's much more complex than that. And so this is for the diversity and complexity. And as it's changing in time, because we are using technologies which are, I mean, moving all the time. So we talk about metamorphic system because it's moving in time and space. We need to have certainly incremental methodology. So if you have a given piece of your system which is already certified and you change, you make an upgrade, for instance, in the software, you are not obliged to redo everything in terms of evaluation, testing, and so on. So in order to make it realistic and also from an economic point of view, affordable for everybody. So these are still, we are still a step behind the evolution of the technology, I should say. So we need to develop now all the methodologies to follow and to be the companion in terms of evaluation, which are coming with the new technologies.
Thank you, Mr. Dotaro. I have a notification from the Secretariat that time is up. It has been a very interesting session with all the panelists sharing their experiences and their views. And I'm sure it has been a useful one for all the participants and as well as the users. And I thank the organizers and all the panelists for being part of the session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.